Hi, and welcome to another edition of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And with an ongoing sort of disputes and arguments, pro and con, with the trans lobby, there's an article today where a leading psychologist says that the trend has gone too far, too fast, and a lot of the issues are caused by peer pressure and undue pressure from others, basically people in the trans community, who are pressurising children into making life-changing, non-reversible decisions when they're incapable of making those decisions, or that the decisions are just plainly wrong because the children in question are not transgender. And the irony is that this psychologist is transgender. And even the psychologist thinks it's gone too far. So I will put myself down into the corner as usual and we'll have a look at this article and discuss. So here it is, and the headline: I worry life-changing trans trend has gone too far, says leading psychologist of 30 years who's trans herself, or himself I suppose. Dr. Erica Anderson has worked as a clinical psychologist in the US for 30 years. The 71-year-old says clinicians are failing to carry out thorough mental health evaluations before recommending hormones or surgeries to young people. And this has been an issue, and it's been something that's been mentioned many times before, that they're rushing to treat. And the reason they're rushing to treat is if they say, I want an assessment, I want a psychological health assessment, I want a psychiatrist to interview the child, I want to make sure there's no other reasoning, I want a full medical and, very important, sociological history taken, then that clinician would be accused of transphobia by the trans lobby, who say, oh no, to question a child who wants to change their lives irrevocably is transphobia. I would suggest that if a child wants to change their life irrevocably, it must be mandatory that these things happen. Some children may be the subject of abuse and may say in their mind, the way they process it is, if I was a girl, I wouldn't get abused. Because obviously the abuser likes boys. And so the problem there isn't that the child's transgender, it's that the child is a victim of abuse. But the trans lobby don't want that investigated. They want, no, he said he's trans, we must make him a girl, straight away. And if you don't say that, you're transphobic. And so the pressure is put on clinicians by this dangerous bunch of trans lobbyists who are destroying children's lives for their agenda. Anyway, to continue there, he says they should be given after exams to ensure teen is ready to transition, and has warned giving hormones on demand will result in cases of very poor outcomes, which is true. And the thing is, the rush is on. Oh, I got to have this before puberty. Everything's rush. But it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if you have these hormones before puberty or not, because if you're born male, it doesn't matter what drugs you take, what hormones you have to put into you, what bits you have chopped off, what bits you have inserted. It's immaterial. It makes not one jot of difference. You are still male. So these doctors that are pressured into damaging children, abusing children, by a dangerous trans lobby. First of all, the doctors should be immediately prosecuted. If they've done this without the correct psychological and sociological checks and examinations, they should be prosecuted. And I'm talking serious jail time, 20 years. Make the doctors frightened of the law and not frightened of this vociferous, hate-filled trans lobby. Make them more frightened of the law. That if they don't do the correct checks, it's 20 years for the destruction of a child's life. I think 20 years is fair enough. Good behaviour, you're out in 10, you'll never be a doctor again. It's enough to put the frighteners on. But we'll go into the story. A top trans psychologist who has helped hundreds of teens transition has warned it has gone too far amid fears many youngsters are making life-changing decisions because it is trendy. Dr. Erica Anderson, who has worked as a clinical psychologist in the US for 30 years, has raised concerns that the rise in trans or non-binary children is the result of peer pressure and also pressure from a vociferous, as I say, trans lobby. The 71-year-old, who is transgender, said clinicians are failing to carry out thorough mental health evaluations before recommending hormones or surgeries to teenagers. He is a former clinical psychologist at the University of California, San Francisco Child and Adolescence Gender Center, where he provided support for hundreds of young people transitioning. For a while, we were all happy that society was becoming more accepting and more families than ever were embracing children that were gender variant. No such thing as gender variant, you're male or you're female. What you have is children with mental conditions. And it could be that some of those mental conditions are the result of sexual abuse, of physical abuse, of mental pressuring, of pressure grouping, of peer pressure, of childhood confusion about sex and gender. There are many, many reasons, but they're not being investigated because the trans lobby say, "Oh, you daren't? No, you mustn't investigate them. Mustn't investigate them. Quick, get them trans. Get them on those drugs. And if you don't, you're transphobic." Now, this psychologist, to continue, is saying, I think it's gone too far. Now it's just got to the point where the kids are presenting at clinics whose parents say, this just doesn't make sense. To flatly say there couldn't be any social influence in the formation of gender identity flies in the face of reality. Teenagers influence each other. This is massively true, and if anyone with children knows this. Peer pressure is a terrible thing sometimes. It can be a force for good, but it can also be destructive, mutually destructive. So this is why you've got to parent them well and stop them from, got to help them resist peer pressure, basically. Dr. Anderson supports puberty blockers and hormone therapy for teens, but says they should be given only after strict examinations to ensure that the youth is ready to transition. And there's no such thing as transitioning. That you're changing body morphology, but you're not changing body physiology. You're maybe changing the shape of this, or adding a little bit there and taking away somewhere else. But the boys will still have prostates, and the girls will still have wombs. And even if you take them out, well, you won't take the prostate out, but you could take the womb out. But then you've just destroyed that girl's life. If in 10 years' time they realise it's a mistake and they actually want to become a woman and have babies, too late. You've made your choice. He revealed he has already intervened on a hormone therapy session for a 13-year-old who identified as male but had yet to meet with a psychologist. And he has warned fellow members of the American Psychological Association committee, tasked with writing transgender healthcare guidelines, to pursue rigorous evaluations for patients to avoid committing malpractice. And this, I think, at this point, I must say that I actually believe a law must be put in place. Now, this is dealing with America, and of course, America, you make your own laws, and that's fine. But speaking as a Brit, and I think Britain needs to ensure that there's basically a tick sheet for doctors. And there's on those tick sheets, they don't just tick them. They've got to then provide backup evidence and paperwork to show that every tick box checked has been appropriately done. And they've got to have psychological and physiological examinations, physical testing, biochemical testing, and then an investigation into the sociology and family history of that child, checking for abuse, peer pressure, contact with the trans lobby, all sorts of things. The whole gamut of tests to make sure that it is not an agenda-driven change with someone else pulling the strings. or that the child is actually abused and it isn't actually transgender, as I said earlier. But that's an aside, and we'll come back to the piece. I have a dictum: when in doubt, doubt. That is the most sensible thing I've heard in this argument. Questioning is a good thing. Well, it's the scientific method. How are you going to find out if you are in lockstep with whatever conclusion you come to first? Yeah, you've got to play devil's advocate. Even if you, on first sight, think, yeah, I actually think they're probably right, and that's fine. But immediately stop and say, yeah, I think they're probably right, but... And then play devil's advocate with yourself and say, right, let me just check this, 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 and this. And you check those things. Because otherwise, you're destroying a life. It follows a 2020 lawsuit filed against the UK's only young gender clinic, the Tavistock and Portman Trust, by Kira Bell, 26, who claimed she had only had a series of superficial conversations with social workers when she began transitioning to male at 16, only to regret getting a mastectomy aged 20 and reverted to being a woman. Too late. Everything has gone. The life is destroyed. And it was only 2 social workers, a couple of conversations. No doctor, no psychologist, no psychiatrist, no background checks, no full medical history, nothing. Dr. Anderson warned that giving hormones on demand will result in many more cases of poor outcomes and many more disappointed kids and utterly destroyed adults eventually. He first spoke out against the rise in children coming out as trans and non-binary in 2018 with the Washington Post, saying a fair number of kids are getting into it because it's trendy. His comments oppose the views of another gender specialist who claims that young teens are in the right state of mind to identify their gender and transition. Dr. A.J. Eckert, medical director of the Gender and Life Affirming Medicine program at the Anchor Health Initiative in Stamford, Connecticut, I would put the little brackets in here, a man with a vested interest in terms of fiduciary fines. He's going to make a lot of money because it ain't cheap, especially not American medicine. So he's encouraging these people to change. It's his speciality, and he's thinking, ka-ching, little dollar signs in the eyes, you know. He said being trans or non-binary should not be treated as a mental illness. That's exactly what it is. He doesn't want a mental illness treated as a mental illness because he's thinking, oh, the psychiatrist will get rich rather than me. Whereas if it's treated as a physical issue, I can get rich. Remember that. This is American medicine. It is money driven. And this man with his vested interest says, no, this mental condition, don't treat it as a mental condition. And then, we'll bring it there. So I'll round that off. I mean, there's loads of comments. How many? 238 comments. I'm not looking at them. They're all going to be the same as what 99.9% of people watching this video will think. And that is that this psychologist is absolutely right. And there needs to be much more invasive testing rather than just handing out pills like Smarties, like Sweeties, you know. Oh, doctor, I think I might be transgender. Yeah, no problem. On the table, off with your ghoulies. Have a couple of these. Oh, look, you're growing breasts. Away you go. I know, you're 11, it's fine. Bing, next. 10 years down the line, actually, I was sexually abused. I didn't realise. Can I be a man again? No, those days have gone. Anyway, a round off, come up, and we will finish this video. Well, it is nice to see a bit of common sense talked about this, and that psychologist is completely correct. There needs to be protections in law for children to protect them from themselves and to protect them from, should we say, trendy parents, and to protect them from the trans lobby. There are so many people trying to destroy young people's lives, and nobody's standing up for them. And they need someone to stand up for them, because they can't all be trans. The very definition is they're not all trans. And so the ones who are not trans but are forced to change are having their lives completely destroyed. And that's wrong. Anyway, If you like what you hear and see on this channel, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and ring the bell for notifications for future output. Leave a like, leave a comment, and until next time, stay safe, stay well, and goodbye.